am the clinical social worker for Chesapeake Supportive Care, which is under the umbrella of Hospice of the Chesapeake. And today I'm really excited to be here to talk to you all about something that I think is super important, and that's the importance of having a plan. We're going to talk about healthcare decisions and what it means and why it matters. So advanced healthcare decisions are also called advanced healthcare directives. I'm sure you may have heard that term thrown around. And some of you may already have your advanced healthcare directives already complete, which is great. But if you don't, it's just a basic term that describes legal documents that can help you plan for future healthcare decisions. The advanced healthcare directives consist of two different parts: the instructive part and the proxy part. So the first part, I think next slide. Thank you, Tammy. Tammy's doing the slides for me, so we might not match up. I'm not good at technology, but Tammy helps me. So the instructive part of an advanced directive is sometimes referred to as a living will. And that part describes medical care you want or do not want if you become terminally ill or permanently unconscious. The proxy part is called the healthcare power of attorney. And that's when you decide the person who would make healthcare decisions for you if you were ever unable to speak for yourself. Both parts are equally important, and they should both be completed. I'm going to have Tammy go to the next slide, but I do want to talk about those parts more in depth. But we're going to go over some other terms real quick. Power of attorney, I'm sure, is something you hear all the time. I think people throw it around quite a bit, whether it makes sense or not in this situation. But the power of attorney is just a legal document that gives a person legal authority to manage your affairs if you are unable to do so. Another form we're going to talk about tonight is the MOST. Each state has their own medical order for life-sustaining treatment. So we're going to talk about Maryland's MOST. And that's a form that's filled out by a physician, a PA, and nurse practitioner. And that represents the treatment a person wants based on their current health and prognosis. And it's an official medical order, MOST. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview of why I should plan for future healthcare decisions. By planning for the future, you can be proactive, express your wishes, and decrease your family stress. So I'm going to have Tammy leave it on this slide just for a few minutes because I think this is important. So it's great to just highlight those bullet points, but they're super important things we need to talk about. Going back to the slide where I talked about the two sections of the advanced healthcare directives. The first part is your medical wishes, and the second part is naming a proxy. And why those two things are so important are for these three main reasons. Also not listed here, which I think is the most important one, is that your wishes will be followed. You have expressed what you want, what you don't want. And by doing that, your family can't argue about what they think is best because you've already written that down, and they're here to help you follow your wishes. You're expressing your wishes, you're being as proactive as possible. I have a copy of the Advanced Care Directive. It's easily available on the Maryland Attorney General's website. And I want to just re-highlight the part because I feel like we went over it pretty quickly, but where it talks about your future healthcare decisions. The advanced directive is really talking about if you are, it goes through three different stages. And what it talks about your living will is in a case of a terminal condition, a consistent vegetative state, and an end stage condition. So the advanced directives are not talking about right now. They're talking about if, God forbid, something happens and you're in one of those situations, persistent vegetative state, terminal condition, end stage type thing. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so advanced directives and Maryland Mills form the same. They are not the same. And one of the biggest differences we talked about them being different are the advanced directives kind of covers a general consensus of what you would want at the end of your life with more serious illnesses. Most is something you can change whenever you want. It's really based on your current situation. And it's also an actual medical order. It's signed by a physician assistant, or an advanced nurse practitioner. We tell everyone to put their MOLST on their fridge because EMS personnel is really trained to look for it. They're not allowed to like dig around your house, but by having it on the fridge, they know to go look for it or post it by the door, because that's something that's really important. If you have a specific wish that you want followed, that EMS knows. I want to talk a little bit more about the advanced directives, because I think it's important to go back to, can you go back one slide, Tammy? I'm the worst. Sorry, you guys. So I think it's important to go back to this. I think almost everything I'm going to come talk about today comes back to this, about why we're planning for future healthcare decisions. So just kind of keep this slide in your mind. Like I said, express your wishes, decreases family stress. I don't know how often your family agrees on things, but I know mine doesn't. Me and my sister and my brother, we all have different opinions about what we would want for ourselves and what we would want for our parents. So luckily my mom has done one, so we don't have to worry about it. The other important document we talked about is the proxy. So we talked about naming your wishes for end stage. The second one's naming a healthcare agent. So I just want to talk about the importance of naming a healthcare agent and why it's helpful in decreasing family stress, why it's being proactive, how it's expressing your wishes. The main thing about picking someone for your proxy is that you want to pick someone that you will trust to follow your wishes. So don't pick someone because you love them the most or you hang out with them the most, they know you the best. You really need to base that decision on who will follow those decisions and who will make the best decision for you. So for example, I'm very emotional when it comes to my own family, especially my mom. I am not her healthcare power of attorney, even though I do this for a living, right? I'm not, because I'm too emotional. I probably wouldn't follow her wishes. I would just, keep her alive at all costs, even though I know she does not want to be in a vegetative state. So she made my brother that because he's more logical and rational. So when something happens to her, he will be in charge of making those medical decisions. I do want to point out on the healthcare decision form, when you name someone, you can also name a backup. You can name two people. It's super individualized and you can do it however you want. All right, next slide. Sorry for going back.
No, that's fine. You had a question come in, so I'm gonna.
Sure.
Yeah, so the question is, if someone does not want to be on a ventilator for years and years, but is willing to try it for a short period of time in case it helps in healing, what is a reasonable, quote, short period of time to try?
Oh, that's a good question. So that question I get asked a lot. Both forms, the advanced healthcare decision and the MOLST form, which we'll talk about more coming up too, address that situation. And I am going to be really honest and tell you there's no reasonable amount of time. It's so different for everybody. It's so different for every situation. The problem is we don't know when you get placed on a ventilator, a lot of the times you can't speak for yourself and you can't say this is my reasonable amount of time. So it's tough. And that's why picking a healthcare proxy is so important. Because if you look at the advanced directives, I wish I was sitting with all of you in person so I could go over all this. Maybe in non-COVID times, we can have an in-person one where I come help you with all this. But when you look at it, you can check a box that says, follow my wishes exactly, or you can say my proxy can listen to the doctors, can listen to whatever's going on, whoever they want, and make the decision based on my wishes and the information available. I would say typically in the MOLST form, you'll see there's a lot of blanks forms where you can fill out, I want to try a ventilator, or I want to try tube feeding, or I want to try dialysis. And a lot of people write for TBD, to be determined. But I would say the most popular answer picked is 2 weeks. People generally throw in 2 weeks because within 2 weeks, your medical team should have a pretty good idea if it's working and you're improving or if it's not. And then at that point in time, your medical team can say to your healthcare proxy, we've tried it for 8 days and they're not improving. We see no brain function. They're not breathing on their own, whatever the treatment is. And then the healthcare proxy can say, okay, we're going to go back and look at the advanced directives that my loved one made and make a decision. So usually 2 weeks is what I see most popular answer. But it's super individualized. Some people leave it blank and just say TBD and let who's ever making decisions for them make that decision when it happens. And that's the hardest thing about filling these out. I'll be super honest. It's so difficult because there's 2 million bajillion scenarios that could happen, and you can't plan for every single one of them. Hopefully that answered your question. It was very long-winded. I'm sorry. All right, next slide, please. Next one, because we did that one. Thank you. So this is the MOLST form, and I want to talk about it because it's a super, super important form to have. So like I said, the MOLST form and the advanced directive form are different, but they are somewhat similar, right? And I would say the MOLST form reflects your advanced healthcare decisions. The MOLST is very detailed, whereas the advanced healthcare decision-making form, your advanced directives living will, is not super detailed. It's just a couple of questions about what is more important to you in terms of quality of life or quantity of life, and keep me alive at no cost, at all costs, whatever it means. And then there's like a middle level choice, like do a little bit. And then there's the, if I'm end stage, let natural progression take its course. And that's kind of it. And that's the healthcare living will, whereas the MOLST is very specific. It talks about a variety of treatments, CPR, hospitalization, artificial nutrition, dialysis. It even talks about what medical testing you would want done, IV hydration, blood transfusions. It goes through all of it. And it portable order, which means it's valid throughout the healthcare system. So anywhere you go in Maryland, it's valid and it's in there. It's valid in other states as well. It's just specific to Maryland. So each state kind of has their own form of it. So some states have different questions, but the most important thing that is on it is the front form of the page. And that's do you want CPR or do you not? And if you don't, then there's some other options. If you don't have a MOLST on file, you're considered what we call a full code. So that means if EMS shows up, they're going to do everything in their power to revive you, right? And so as we know, CPR is only initiated when your heart stops beating. Next slide, please, Tammy. So these are next steps to plan healthcare decisions. These are some good websites for you to check out if you want. Prepare for Your Care and Why Most. They're both really good websites to kind of help break them down and go over them. I know Tammy has a copy of the Most to show you on here. Can we bring that up, Tammy, or is it like at the very end?
Yeah, let's do that at the very end because I'll have to stop sharing the PowerPoint. And then,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can share that at the end.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Next slide, please. Next, helpful steps to help you plan advanced healthcare decision. So first step, which we just went over, is exploring all your options and things like that. This step is the next step, which is probably the most important step, really discussing your preferences with your loved ones and your primary care provider. So there's a good website here for resources, but I think a lot of people think about these things, especially depending on your age and your health situation. So people with chronic illnesses probably think about it more often. As you're getting older, it becomes more often. And some people fill these forms out. They do a living will with their attorney, and then that's it. It's filed away somewhere. It's no good unless you discuss your preferences with your loved ones. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still valid and legal document. However, if they don't know what it says and what you want for yourself in those times, then anything can happen. If we don't know where it's filed, if we don't know where it's kept, if we don't know you've done one, your loved ones can't help you. It's also really important to discuss with your primary care provider because your goals for yourself and your wishes should drive your medical care, right? So if you want super aggressive care and you want everything done, they should know about it so they can offer you all your decisions. If you're at a point in your life where you want some things, but not all things, your doctors, your whole medical team should know that. That way they can treat you accordingly. And if you want just some comfort care and you don't want to go through a lot of these things, again, they can recommend options and things that fit within your goals and your framework. You all are the cruise directors. We're all just here to help you steer the ship however you want it to go. But we can't do that until you tell us the destination. So really having those conversations is really important. So first step is obtaining all these forms, asking about them, thinking about what you would want for yourself and what's more important to you, depending on where you are in your age, in your life, in your illness, whether you don't have an illness. But the next step is really discussing your preferences with your loved ones. And when you pick a healthcare proxy, it's important to really pick someone, like I said, that you trust, but also pick someone that you're going to be able to talk to about your decisions and is willing to be your healthcare proxy. I've had a lot of people I've worked with say, I'm going to pick so-and-so. And then we talk to that person and they say they can't do it. It's just too hard. They cannot make those healthcare decisions. So it's important to pick someone that you trust to follow your wishes and also is available to do that for you. So those are the first important things to do. Think about what you want for yourself and what you would want for your treatment, and then discuss those preferences with your loved ones and your primary care provider. Next slide, please. Next step, documenting your decisions. So you've thought about what you want. You went to all these websites I'm telling you about. You really looked into it. You talked to your loved ones. You've talked to your doctors. Next step is documenting it, right? You can say it out loud all you want, but until it's documented, it's not technically official. So documenting it is really, really important. We have some good websites here, the 5wishes.org. They do a lovely, lovely, lovely advanced care planning. So they have a great set of advanced directives. I really like their format because it reviews a lot of other things as well, like even down to like what music you'd want played at your funeral and things like that. The one I showed you, which is the Maryland Advanced Directive from the Attorney General's website, it's good. It covers all the basics, but it's not super personal. Whereas 5 Wishes really is super personal and really focuses on your wishes. MarylandMolst.org. Maryland, we actually have a really good website for a MOLST form. There's instructions on how to fill it out too. So if you're thinking about it or you have questions about it and no one's available, MarylandMolst.org has some good, helpful information. You can get the MOLST form on that website and download it, fill it out. The advanced directives, and I don't know if we talked about this, the advanced directives do have to have 2 witnesses. So 2 people have to sign off saying they witnessed you making these decisions, witnessed you filling it out, and that you're of sound mind. And those witnesses can really be anyone except for anybody you name as your healthcare proxy. So say you name your daughter Deborah as your healthcare proxy. She cannot witness that form. And you also can't have a witness that would get something in your will. So financially, you know, if you name daughter Deborah as your proxy, but then your nephew Chad is getting your house in the will, he can't witness it. So 2 kind of like impartial witnesses. And as we talked about before, after you document the MOLST, that does need to be signed by a physician assistant, or nurse practitioner. Next slide, Tammy. So this is really awesome and really important. So quick review, number 1, we thought about what we want. Second, we discussed it with our loved ones and our primary care provider or anyone in our medical team. You should really talk about it with anyone on your medical team. Because nowadays, most people have more than just a primary care provider. We have so many specialists, and we want them all to work together. So we've thought about it, we've discussed it, we've documented it. Now we're kind of here, what to do with them. I suggest people to print out several copies of it. I think you should have a copy in your own home. The person you name as your healthcare proxy should have a copy of your advanced directives. And you should provide a copy to your primary care physician as well. And generally, especially now with technology, they'll scan it in. It should be available wherever you go, depending on what hospital or what specialist. Hopefully it'll be in the system. They also do have these kinds of things like a little wallet card you can print out, which is great. So you can carry it around, downloading in an app if you're using an app. They're all there so that you have them handy. I also, like I said, with the MOLST form, I think it's really because of EMS where they look for it, keeping it by your door, keeping it on your fridge. I think it's also great to have your advanced directives there. One thing we didn't talk about with the advanced directives, but I want to just make sure I mention because I think it's important. You can judge for yourself if it's important or not, but I think it's important. in the advanced directives and in the MOLST form, none of them are really written into stone and until you can't make decisions for yourself, right? So if you are still alert and oriented and you have a fall and EMS shows up, you can say your wishes out loud to them. You know, I said I didn't want to go to the hospital, but I do. They'll take you. In the advanced directives and the MOLST are so important because they take effect when you cannot speak for yourself, right? And that can be for all sorts of reasons. You know, it happens so often without warning. And I'm in my 30s and I have an advanced directive, just because you never know what could happen. I recommend them to everyone because it's for when you cannot speak for yourself and your wishes will still be communicated. And that's, you know, if we go back to that slide that I kept making Tammy go back to, you don't have to, about why it's so important, because it really expresses your wishes. It decreases the stress from your family. If something happens to you, they know exactly what you want. And the MOLST form is super important if you don't want CPR, because if that's something you don't want, because it is really hard on the body, and depending your condition, a lot of people choose not to have it because you can end up in worse shape than you're in. If you don't have that MOLST form, EMS has to give you CPR. So it's really important to have it. I'm rambling now. Okay, so I'm gonna just do a quick review. We're going to think about it. We're going to discuss it, and then we're going to document it. And then after we document it, we're gonna print it out and give it to everyone we know. Not everybody, but copy by your door, copy for you in your files, copy for who your healthcare proxy is, and a copy for your physician, and anyone in your team that you want to communicate it to. So just a quick thank you to John and Kathy Belcher Institute. They're so supportive of our community education programs at Hospice of the Chesapeake. We're just so grateful to them. If you have any information or want to know more about what I do with Chesapeake Supportive Care, Tammy has the number, and you're able to reach out however you want. Tammy is going to share the MOLST form for us. That way I can just kind of review it with you. This is the first time I've seen my picture on here, so my head might not have been in this the whole time. I'm sorry. Because I think it's important to go over the MOLST. But if you ever have any questions, feel free to type in, because this is a lot of information that we've gone over.
All right, it's not showing for me. Hang on. Oh, I got it.
Oh, you got it?
Okay. I got it.
Tammy is the best. So this is, I just tried to use this like a touch screen. This is just a copy of the Maryland MOLST form. It's pretty basic. This is the first page that I was talking about, which addresses CPR. And the first one is attempt CPR. So if you want everything done, that's what we pick, attempt CPR. If you're like, I don't want chest compressions, I know they're going to break my ribs, I know it's not great for me, then we go here to option, we go to this second part, and then you've got A1, A2, or DNRB. A1 means you can intubate. So you'll say, I do not want CPR, but I'm willing to be intubated. So intubation is when they put a tube down your throat to help you breathe. So you're okay with that. Option A2 is do not intubate. So you don't want the CPR, you don't want a tube down your throat, but you're like, try the CPAP, try the BiPAP, try some forced air, see if it helps me. So that's an option. And then, so that's option A1 and A2. And then you've got your no CPR, option B, palliative and supportive care. So that is all about comfort. You'll take oxygen to provide comfort, control any external bleeding. all prior to your cardiac arrest, pain relief, anything like that. You're really focusing on your comfort care. But, if your heart stops beating, you just want to allow death to occur naturally. You don't want all of those things done. So that's option, we call it a DNR, do not resuscitate. So option B. So those are that's the first page, a quick overview of them. And like we said, EMS must follow them. They're signed by a physician or nurse practitioner or physician assistant. My apologies. Oh. And then there's the second page, the back of it.
I'm going to jump in a sec, Jessica, because you had another question that I thought might be good to answer. Sure. So the question is there any data available yet regarding what was the range of time that COVID patients were on ventilators, specifically those who recovered and were taken off ventilator due to no longer needed?
Oh, that's a super good question. Not off the top of my head. I would have to look up some, because I'm sure there's some studies, and whether they're published or not, because it's, as we all know, we're all kind of learning COVID day by day, and new information. But that's a really interesting question and a really good point. And I think a lot of that depends upon, and this is something we talk about a lot when we're going over the most form, advanced directives, things like that. We're talking a lot about how your body is right now and what it can sustain. So we know that someone who's 21, super healthy, runs every day, is more likely to survive CPR, ventilation, things like that, versus someone who's 95 with COPD. And so I think that's partially the case with COVID too. I think a lot of those statistics and data about how long people were on the ventilators, how long it took to wean them off, and how well they did, probably depends a lot on how they were before they went into the hospital, what their baseline was. But I unfortunately don't have any specific numbers for you, but it's a super interesting question. I'm probably going to Google that as soon as this is over, and just see what journal articles have been published so far. And that kind of goes back, I don't know if it's the same person asked those two questions, but it goes back to the other question, like how long should I put on there that I'm willing to be ventilated? Because the pandemic probably changed a lot of people's minds about that, right? When I say the most popular answer is 2 weeks, I'm sure a lot of people were on COVID ventilators for more than 2 weeks, and came off of them. It's just a completely new and different illness that I don't think anybody was thinking about when they filled out their most form or their advanced directives. So that's just a super interesting one to think about. Really good question. Sorry, I don't have specific numbers.
All right, so we've got another question in.
Okay.
What is the difference, and you're going to have fun with this, what's the difference in services between Chesapeake Supportive Care and hospice? Do you normally go over these forms with clients if they don't have them in place?
So I am going to have fun with this one because I love Chesapeake Supportive Care. I am so blessed to have the job I have. I love Chesapeake Supportive Care, which is a palliative medicine company. And I also love hospice care, but palliative care and supportive care is really where it's at. And we do go over all these forms. I always tell people the first time I meet them, like our initial visits, we put on supportive care, we put the advanced directive form and the most form in our welcome packet. I always tell people, if you have this done, we're going to talk about it. If you don't have it done, we're also going to talk about it. Because these decisions and your wishes really should be driving your care. The differences in hospice service and palliative supportive care services is that hospice is very specific to end of life. So to qualify for hospice, insurance companies say a doctor has to say you have 6 months or less to live, given your prognosis. Many people live longer than that. We have no crystal ball. None of us know. But that's kind of the criteria to get a hospice service. Supportive and palliative care is a treatment approach. So it's palliative is a treatment approach. Supportive care is the service. We have nurse practitioners who are having these conversations. And they're not only having these conversations once. So like I said, at the first appointment, I'm like, we're going to talk about these things because they're so important. Our nurse practitioners are going to talk to you about them, maybe not at every visit, but throughout the journey of your illness. Because as we know, there's a lot of ups and downs with aging, with chronic illness. And like I said in the beginning, the MOLST form really represents your status right now. Whereas the advanced directive specifically focuses on terminal condition, end of stage, or persistent vegetative state. So that's different. You can say, if I'm terminal and I'm end stage, I want to just focus on comfort care. But a lot of times you get a chronic illness and you're not end stage, you just need some more support, which is where supportive care comes in. And we'll talk about the MOLST in the beginning. We'll talk about the advanced healthcare directives. So sometimes you're feeling good and you're feeling okay. You want to be a full code and you want all these treatments. Great. But sometimes you reach a point where you want to change that. We'll talk about it again and we can change it for you anytime you want. We're also there in supportive care to really help facilitate those conversations with your family because, if we go back to my little step-by-step, step one, think about what you want, really process it. Step two is discuss. And sometimes those can be very emotional conversations and you want your healthcare provider there sometimes. And so we're there for that. And then on hospice, I will say hospice, we talk about your MOLST form and your advanced care directives because as well, but hopefully by the time you reach hospice, you've already had those conversations because you're making the choice for hospice, which means you're making the choice for really comfort care. So hopefully someone's gone over it with you by then, preferably supportive care. But we talk about it all the time. And like I said, your status changes. We follow you throughout the duration of your illness and we can change it and talk about what this symptom means and whether you would want this treatment now that you have this symptom. Because sometimes we think we want things and then we get sick and we're like, actually, we don't. Or sometimes we think we don't want and we get sick and we're like, actually, that helped. So it's constantly changing. It's constantly in flux. So hopefully that answered your question. I get on a tangent sometimes. So we're back to our MOLST form. We have page 2. Like I said, it talks about artificial ventilation, blood transfusion, hospital transfer, medical workup, antibiotics, artificial nutrition and fluids, and dialysis. And so there's so many different options you can pick. As you see, you can do 6A, 6B, 6C, 6D, and definitely read over them. I will say they vary. There's usually a little level. So there's, I don't want anything. Let me just be comfortable and die naturally. There's like a mid-level and give me everything. And then sometimes there's in between. So if you look at them, that's where it comes in with those time limit. And then we have a blank. And so you can fill that out however you want. You can write, I want to be on a CPAP or a BiPAP for 2 weeks. And if I get better, great. If not, I'm done. You can write, to be determined. You can write 1 week. I've had people write 1 day. It's just such a personal decision. And it's, nobody, and that's something else I have not said during this presentation. And I want to make very clear that there is no right or wrong decision in any of these. They're just decisions and they all have different outcomes and different things to happen, but there's no right or wrong. They're just different. And every person is different and every person wants something different for themselves. But that's the best way to make sure your wishes are followed is by having these conversations and looking at these forms. When I go over this form, a lot of people say, I didn't even know there was a back to this. I didn't know I could say, yes, I would like to have a feeding tube, but no, I don't want a breathing tube, because it's really personalized to you. So Tammy's scrolling down. This is the instructions. It'll go over it. I think they can be overwhelming, which is why I think it's great to look at it, but also really discuss it with someone you might, trust. Again, we can update a MOLST form whenever you want. Just got to let your, primary care physician know, or your nurse practitioner. And usually it's changed when our health changes, right? Like we talked about with CPR, sometimes it's great, and we're young and we're healthy and we want it done. And then sometimes our body's not in the best shape, so we don't want CPR, which is okay too. So we can change it. I think that's the end of my presentation. I talked a lot and I talked really fast. So I'm here for questions, comments, anything you guys might have regarding any of the forms or any of the treatments, anything like that. I'm here to hopefully help answer those.
Jessica, I just want to throw in there, as you were saying, going through the MOLST form, since the MOLST form is physician's orders, I think most people, when they fill that out, are sitting with either their physician or with a nurse practitioner, someone in the medical field that's going to be explaining what all of that means. But I also want to remind folks, if you have the advanced directive, as Jessica was saying earlier, reading that advanced directive is, it's legal language. It's not a pleasant read, and there's really no explanations in there.
There's not.
Feel free, to contact your doctor's office. Some doctor's offices have staff that are dedicated to helping folks fill in those advanced directives. So it's really important, when you get to, the section about, do you want to be hydrated or do you want to be tube fed? It's important that you understand what happens at the end of life, what's happening to your body. I know personally for me, when I started working at the Department of Aging, over 15 years ago, and started understanding a little bit what happens at the end of life, I changed my advanced directive. So it's important for you to understand what's happening and to, ask questions before you fill that form out, because, you're reading through it and you think, well, of course I want this. And as Jessica was saying, later on, you might be saying, oh my gosh, that wasn't for me. So feel free when you're filling that out to ask for help. Ask your doctor or someone in his office, ask those questions. And then I also just want to throw out, because I know we have another question here, for those of you that might not have been checking the chat box, if you need an Maryland Advanced Directive form, if you need a MOLST form, if you need a 5 wishes form, shoot me an email, because we have those in the office. I can mail them out to you. I can also get things to you electronically. So if you want any of those forms, just shoot me an email. You all should have my email address because I sent you the Zoom link. So just shoot me an email and we'll get those forms to you.
So Mary, we did have another question that came in. That is there a workshop that explains what happens at end of life?
We've done it in the past, and if that's an interest, then we will certainly get one done. I'm going to be starting to plan we're kind of finished up for this rest of through June. We have our workshop scheduled for through June. We generally take off for the summer, but if that's a need, then that is something that we can definitely get scheduled when we do the September through next June's workshops, certainly.
And then there was a question in the chat as well. What's the easiest way to look for another state's version of the MOLST form if you're going to another state?
Google. I Google everything. I would just type in Pennsylvania medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, and you should get a PDF for it. I think Pennsylvania's is like the Post. they changed that word. But yeah, just Google the state and then medical order for life-sustaining treatment. And if that doesn't work or you don't have access to it, I'm just throwing that out there because we're all on Zoom. But you know, if you don't have access to the internet or Google, find that, you know, state hospital, Department of Aging, call them, they'll have it. You can also ask your healthcare provider. I'm sure Mary can get you one if you're working with her. I always tell people, ask the social worker. So if you know a social worker, ask them and we'll get it for you. That's what social workers do. So tons of ways.
All right, we had another question come in as well. My 30-year-old son is on Medicaid and has not been to a doctor in over 5 years. He has no primary care doctor. Who would sign his MOLST form?
Good question. He can have, you know, it's hard. Well, for my first thing I'm going to say as the social worker here, I'm going to say, definitely get a primary care physician and have them sign it. But any medical provider is qualified to sign it. You know, so if he goes to urgent care, I don't know if he, you know, he hasn't been a doctor in a long time. So I'm guessing from context clues that he doesn't have a chronic illness. He's not getting medications regularly prescribed or anything like that. So if he were to get a cold or something or need antibiotics and he goes to urgent care, you could have one of the providers at urgent care sign it. They might be hesitant to. And again, I would keep in mind that the MOLST form is really, well, I always think it's important, but don't worry too much if he wants to be a full code, because if he wants everything done, that's everybody's default. If EMS can't find a MOLST, that's what they do. But if he has specific wishes that he wants on that MOLST, I would make an appointment with, you know, any practitioner and let them know that's what the appointment's for. And they should be able to sign it.
That's all the questions I see so far.
Okay.
We have a few minutes left. If anyone else has anything they want to ask, now's the time. We will go ahead. I see there's an interest in having a workshop on end of life, what's happening, and that will help you make your decision. So we will go ahead and get that scheduled. And just stay tuned. Most of you should be on our email list now, so you'll be getting the workshop updates from me. Feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions, or if you have any suggestions or ideas of other things that you want to hear about. And Jessica, will it be possible for you to send the PowerPoint to us so that I can send that out to folks?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll take care of that. I'm sure Tammy will be the one sending it to me.
She will. I was gonna say, I'm not gonna do anything. Tammy will send it.
So when I get that from Tammy, folks, I will get that to you probably tomorrow, so that you have the PowerPoint that might, you know, trigger some questions, or, you know, help you remember what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some good links in there. And there's also, you know, Supportive Care's email address in there. If you think of any questions, you're welcome to email it. They'll forward it to me and I can answer them for you. That's what we're here for. Any help we have, any help we can provide.
And, you know, since we did record this session, it usually takes us a few days before we get it up on both our website, the Department of Aging website, and on the department's YouTube channel. But you'll be able to go back to refresh, you know, maybe just to refresh your memory of something you heard, because there was a lot of information that came out in a short period of time here.
Yeah, it's a lot. And these are heavy decisions, and they're emotionally charged. So it sounds really great all on paper and in black and white, but when you sit down and think about it, it can be overwhelming and it can be a lot.
All right, well then I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And Jessica, thank you so much for giving up your evening. And Tammy, thank you too. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you tomorrow. So take care, everybody. Continue to take care of yourself during this COVID period. And, you know, when we get those little peaks of sunshine this week, try to get out there and enjoy the sunshine in between the raindrops. Bye-bye, everybody.